adding 2.5 to it, there's other items that go into that.
Yes, our overrides,
Right.
our
So,
debt overrides.
I think it may be helpful if you could explain that. I think,
Well, I wasn't here for town meeting, and that's why I was referring over, and
yeah, it doesn't matter what town meeting did or didn't do, but I'm
the
just saying.
calculations are the calculations.
Right. And that's what was
In
done.
addition to the 2.5 increase, there's our override debt,
Right.
which we're currently paying for police station, parts of the Batchelder School, Smith property, Eisen.
I'm sorry, Eisenhower's not
Not
exempt.
Eisenhower. What else? Help me, Steve.
Various equipment,
Those are the three big ones. Joe?
various equipment we borrow from, big equipment like you.
I'm talking about
Overrides.
override.
Yeah, that's debt exclusion.
Yeah. Big P.
Okay.
But those are the big ones. So that's added on top of. Although, it's hard to say that that's an increase because it's been done already unless some new debt came into
Mr. Chairman,
play.
just to clarify a little bit more, again, the overrides affect everybody across the board the same way, based upon their assessed valuation. But what happens in the residential property owner's situation, and I think what's probably happened a little bit here, is that the assessed valuation, average assessed valuation of commercial industrial property has decreased, while residential property values have remained steady. Therefore, the burden shifts a little bit more to the residential. So you'll see more of an increase on a residential property than a commercial property. But in a good economy, when the vacancy rates are small, you're going to see that shift again. So right now, we're at about an 89, what is it, 88.12 or 87.13. We've seen that shift over the years to 86.14. We've seen it close to 90.10. Depending upon what the market is out there in relation to vacancy rates and what the commercial industrial properties are generating for income for the town. So that's when we see, on average, what happens to the residential property owner. But as far as overrides, it hits everybody the same across the board exponentially as far as what the assessed valuation is. So I think what we've seen here is a little bit of a shift in the commercial industrial property dropping, so the residential property is assuming more of the burden. And once the economy gets better, it's just the other way around.
Yeah, but if I understand CIP, it doesn't matter what the price of a commercial property is selling for, and you're a factor.
Well,
right?
but it does.
Vacancies.
It does because the value of that property is based upon the income that's generated through the rents. That's what it's gonna sell for.
You know,
And
but they,
it's,
but they also have.
If they collected, $100,000 worth of rent, then that property's worth $1 million. If they only collected $50,000 worth of rent, it's only worth $500,000.
Which they have control of.
Well, no, which is what the market has control over. And again, in your example where, what if they reduce their rent by 50%? The assessors are gonna take that into consideration, was that paper that they filled out with the information really realistic based upon a square foot basis, based upon the location? And they'll make the adjustment. And when they make the adjustment, the property owner is either gonna buy into it and pay the taxes, or they're gonna file for an abatement and come in and justify it to them. And the checks and balances are on the property owners accepting the assessed valuation once they get their tax bill, or coming in and filing for an abatement saying, you're way out of whack.
Okay, at this point, are there any additional questions from people sitting in the audience?
I'd just like to get.
I guess Deanne has spoken too. Go ahead.
I'd just like to get more clarification on Mr. Blaine's question, is to understand I understand the calculation just fine, starting with the $30 million for the FY 2009 levy limit. But is that levy limit approved each year? Is that through the appropriations of the town meetings each year, or is that something that would take
I
it from
think,
1998 all the way to the present time?
The levy limit, if you go back to the passage of Prop 2.5, which goes back quite a while ago, it established a limit. And at that point, the town was allowed to increase the levy limit by 2.5% plus new growth, plus what they call a general government override, which we've had one in our history, right, which allowed the levy limit by town meeting vote to be increased. This is outside of debt overrides, which are temporary increases to the levy limit to fund a school building, a police station, or whatever. Okay? So,
Those are also over.
so that's historic. It's historic in terms of each year, we add 2.5%, and then whatever building permits have generated new growth, those are added to those numbers. Now, what we appropriated at town meeting to spend, right, has to be below the levy limit, or up to the levy limit, or you have to get an override. In other words, we have to have a balanced budget at town meeting. So there have been years that there've been proposals to do an override to balance the budget, and only one in the history of the town since Prop 2.5 has passed. The other overrides have been debt overrides for a specific project which have a lifetime. When the bond is paid off, then that portion of the amount over the levy limit is brought down back to the levy limit. Not trying to confuse you, but
No, I
that's
understand, I
that's
understand.
the mechanism.
But again, it's back to my original question is, what you're saying is it's historic. So we really, to come up with what's on this sheet, 2009 levy limit of 30,020,393, you really have to go back to the beginning of
Well,
Prop 2.5.
basically, you go back to the previous year, to what the limit was.
the previous year to that.
You multiply it by you add 2.5% to it, and then you add what additional new growth took place between this year and.
I understand the calculation, I really do. What I really think we need to look at, because this is a factor, and I agree with what you said earlier, Mr. Chair, around, it doesn't matter what the assessed value is of the property, because the levy limit is the levy limit. So you're gonna get assessed either $14, or you're gonna assess $28 if you half of the appraisal. So getting back to that, getting to the point of the levy limit, I think what I'm trying to say is we need to look at the reality of the situation in the economy today and determine is that $30 million, that historic number, is that truly something that this town can live with? Or is it gonna increase 7.5% for most of the town residents?
This is where town meeting comes in, because you don't have to spend to the levy limit. You got it? So in other words,
Seems to be able to do
town
that
meeting,
pretty well.
town meeting can say, you know, we don't wanna spend to the levy limit, we're gonna spend somewhere below, and therefore, we're not gonna approve a budget that taxes to the levy limit.
So add
But
your
the levy
town-
limit doesn't change.
Yeah, it can.
I don't know if you can you can reduce the levy limit by some.
Sure,
You can have an underride.
Absolutely.
You can have an underwrite,
You can
okay.
have an underwrite.
So I've
Desperate
been
times
corrected, you
call
can
for
have an
desperate
underwrite.
measures.
Happened,
Has anyone ever done one?
Yeah, there's been a couple.
They have?
Have they?
South Shore?
I'm not sure exactly where, I know that they were probably within the last 10 to 15 years, something that I can recall recently. There's been some.
I guess my point
Well,
is,
the Department of Revenue website, you can find it.
I'd like the board to consider something like that, to the fact that in this economy, I understand we need to fund the town services, but in this time, in the last 2 years, you're talking about people who don't have the money to come up with 7.5% extra, okay? So you need to look at that. We need to be conscious of the situation and the economy and people without jobs here, living on unemployment, those kinds of things, so, you know.
You have to think about it too differently for residents, because for them, they have to pay their taxes with post-tax dollars. The commercial, they get federal and state deductibles that we don't get. So it's not only 7.5%, you have to go probably get, out of your household income, 10 or 11% to pay that 7.5%.
I think I represent a lot of people that have that same situation.
Oh, I think you do. I think you do.
I think the board needs to consider looking at that levy limit and determining what this town can live on.
You know, out of 22 surrounding communities, 17 surrounding communities have a split tax rate. You have to ask why. And I think it's about equity. And I'm not saying I'm in agreement with a split tax rate, but you know, a lot of people know how I feel about this, and the research is out there. 17 out of 22 towns do it. I think we need to get a little more educated.
Okay, Mr.
I have no problem with a split tax rate. If you're gonna do it for general government, I'd say no. All right? If you wanna build something, yeah. You wanna do it for general government, you better start cutting someplace else. My insurance payments have gone up $150 a month for all my employees. All right? Through Tufts. You guys have gotta examine what's happening out in general government.
Basically, the same thing my businesses do.
All right, but I'm saying, general government.
Yeah.
all right, let's,
Don't try and raise the tax rate or split the rate just for general government.
Deanna, you had your hand up. And I think Mr. Jones had his hand up.
I just wanted to point out, according to the executive summary, the average residential tax bill over a 10-year period has gone up 61%. And again, the question remains, is that sustainable for the average resident? And along the lines of how many communities have a split tax rate, I just would feel better educated if you could let us know what your information is recently about communities that are more like North Reading and what you are seeing as to the shift, if there is one.
I could do that. At the current time, a lot of the communities that are within our surrounding areas do not have a certified tax rate as of yet. But that is something that I can put together after the certification process. And I could, send it to Greg and he could have it at a Board of Selectmen's meeting. I could put it in the paper too if you want.
Great, I think that'd be helpful. Thank you
That
very
would
much.
be great.
Mr. Jones, did I see your hand up?
Well, just a couple of straight comments. Number one, the maximum allowable levy, if you look, is debt exclusion. That's almost 7% of what the tax allowable levy is, just for curiosity's sake. Secondly, being an old FinCom member, there's a difference between overrides, which are only for operating budgets, and once they're approved, they last forever, unless you have an underride, which happen maybe fewer fingers than I have on a hand. And the debt exclusions are on there for the life of whatever the bond is. A third one, which we've never used, is a capital exclusion, which lasts only in the given year that it's approved. So you mix apples and oranges sometimes if you say overrides. We've only done that once.
Mhm.
And with due respect to Mr. Carucci's comment, which I understand the philosophy of it, but it's not only general government schools. And you have to balance those two also, rather than just general government. And lastly, just a curious question, probably Mr. Tassoni can answer it. At the 1401, how much was left on the table because of the rounding?
$9,500.
Well, people should know.
I think she said it in the
Yeah,
beginning.
it's in the report.
It's in the
These
report.
are old deals back here.
It's 9,544.
It's a sound system.
Thank you.
Okay, are there any other comments from those visitors this evening before I close the public hearing and open it to board discussion? Mr. O'Leary.
I don't think, again, at this particular time, and I'm not in favor of tax classification for the town of North Reading, at this particular time, until we get some more commercial industrial growth, which would make more sense. And we haven't had that, and we're not gonna see it for a little while, until we make some major investments in infrastructure in order to promote that. Again, in relation to what was presented here, and Mr. Tyne, I'll clarify it a little bit, as far as, comparing apples to apples on our little charts here that you handed out. I mean, if you look at just the tax classification for a similarly assessed piece of property, whether it be commercial, industrial, or residential, if you shift it 10%, we can save the average residential homeowner $86. That's on a similarly assessed, that's not the average assessed commercial industrial, which is far higher, it's almost twice as much. So on an even keel here, it's only $86 we can save someone on a similarly assessed piece of property. If we look at the average assessed valuation, if we take the numbers from last year, I mean, already the average assessed commercial and industrial property is paying almost $5,200 more in real estate taxes